So I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker. And I was so interested and so happy to find out that she is actually someone I know. She and I actually went to the same high school. She's a year ahead of me, and she was the valedictorian. We actually met a few years later in college. We were both at TSU to see the Dalai Lama speak. We saw each other and we sat together, and I was just so excited to see her today. She looks the same, and I know she's going to be a great speaker. So I am very happy to introduce Miss Juliet Stepeche.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be able to join you here today, and I want to also say a thank you to being in the House of Labor and to Mr. Claude Cummings for allowing us to spend time here today. The importance of sharing the vision and voice of a community. That is what KPFT allows the community to be able to listen to what is happening out there and changes that are happening and what we need to do to make the world a better place. And so I had the wonderful privilege and opportunity to serve on the HISD school board for 5 years, and now I serve as the mayor's director of education for the city of Houston. And so, I've had people ask, what in the world does a director of education do? And isn't the city outside of the school area? I think it's just become so critically important and evident that there needs to be a voice and a champion for young people. We now live, as Kleinberg always tells us, in the most diverse city in the country. But we also live in a city that's tremendously segregated. We have many communities that exist in isolation, and we have children that need to have someone there that will serve as a voice, that will be able to share what is going on in their lives. And as Gordon was saying earlier, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. And so what we could say in terms of how we utilize communications to a certain extent, well, that's kind of what I see at the same level when we're looking at what's happening in the education system today. Education, it's such a wide area. It's essentially from womb to tomb, right? A child can learn while they're still inside their mother's belly. They can listen, they can hear, they get the emotional, everything from their mother, from the world that's around them. They talk about how music and sound and influence, all those things have just such a large impact on the life of a child. And then you talk about how education continues in the pre-K through 12 level, and then there's also post-high school education. But then, for instance, I just learned of a new word. I served on the school board for 5 years, and I learned a new word called opportunity youth. Opportunity youth, young people that might have had a brush-in with the criminal justice system. They're not going to school. They're not working. What are we doing to help the opportunity youth that exist in our community as well? And more recently, I was talking to another group and I said, well, Juliet, what about older folks that need educational opportunity as well? And I tell them, I was like, it really is. Education is a lifelong experience. And yet, what can we do to better facilitate the resources and the opportunity that exist in this diverse, fantastically amazing community, right? And so, even though we have so much opportunity, Kleinberg talks about how there are structural barriers that exist that prevent young people and old people in our community from being able to connect to essential resources. And so since I served on the school board for 5 years, and I tell folks I started with rose-colored lenses. I thought I was going to be making good schools better. I thought I was going to be helping every kid go off to college. And instead, my entire worldview was opened up to a situation that I must say I was grossly uninformed. 80% of the children that go to the Houston Independent School District are economically disadvantaged. 62% are Latino, 25% African American, and you see a message coming from the young people telling us what is happening in terms of the city becoming almost a tale of two cities. The young people at Furr High School actually created a film called The Other Side of Town. I strongly encourage people to please go online. Larry has played it at numerous events. I have too. It's important to share the wisdom and the vision and the discussion and the perspective of young people today. And in that video, the young people say, we know that education is a key. We do see tremendous inequities that exist. Can someone please do what is right to make sure that everyone has that opportunity, right? And so you sit here today and you say, we are in 2016. And my idea as a child, growing up as the daughter of immigrants from Mexico and Argentina, my parents had this fervent belief in the American dream. But it's like the American dream, it cannot be fulfilled if the resources of education and great educational opportunity are available to every child. So while I was serving on the school board, I just saw this radical change where it was kind of like kids were getting over-tested and they just didn't have the same level of opportunity. And then you also saw these standardized tests being used in such a punitive manner. And then the state cut $5.4 billion to public education. And in 2011, dozens of school districts came together to file a school finance litigation case. It made its way all the way to first of all, at the district court level, the district court judge said, yes, the state funding system is unconstitutional. We have to do something that is correct because the state constitution requires that the legislature and the state provide an efficient system of free public schools. So I know that during that time frame I thought, well, when the legislature doesn't do what is right, though we have fantastic champions there trying to fight to do what is right, the overwhelming majority that were there, voted for these different types of, didn't correct what was going on with the funding system, decided to pass more and more tests, and decided to make the system where it was difficult for schools to be able to have the resources that they need to help the most vulnerable children. But I said, well, our history has shown us that when the legislature will not do what's right, when there is a claim or a case that's filed, hopefully the Texas Supreme Court will do what is right and tell the legislature to correct things. Well, it didn't happen, right? What happened? Friday the 13th. What a day to pick to put out an opinion, right? So Friday the 13th, the Texas Supreme Court says, hey, guess what? We know the system is Byzantine. We know that it's not sufficient. We know that it's horribly underserving our young people, but it meets minimum constitutional requirements. And I think that is something that, now the community, we need to get angry. We need to get upset because, we have a system in which, I don't know how many people know this as well, but it's like with the system of recapture is going to take away about $165 million from the Houston Independent School District and send it to the state. And the thing is, it's like that's going to happen, and that discussion's taking place right now. Right now that, they're saying, okay, we're going to have to figure out, will HISD voluntarily fork over $165 million, or will they say, no, we're not going to do that? Put it to the voters to decide whether you want to send your money off to the state or keep it locally, right? But guess what? If the city of Houston says, we don't want to send our tax dollars to the state, well, the TEA can then say, we will attach to property in downtown Houston, and we will take that property and assign it to another school district. So that means that Tenneco Tower will be assigned to, let's say, Far San Juan Alamo. Chevron Tower will be now a part of Corpus Christi School District. It sounds like something that, we can't even believe, right? But another thing is like, look at what's happening. Informed, engaged, involved citizens are not aware that this is happening, right? And so that's why, it's like we're trying to share that information in the media. We're trying to use But it's like, that's why KPFT can be such an important, informative catalyst in the community when it comes to what's happening in the educational system today. Because the educational system, of course we know, there is no greater indicator for the health and well-being of a community than the education level of its population. And there are some frightening statistics that exist. In Region 4, which encompasses several large counties in this area, only 18% of all children are reading at the advanced grade level. 10% of African American children and 11% of Latino children are reading at grade level. That's the indicator for college and career readiness. And so when I was on the school district board, we were constantly focusing on those issues of grades and meeting annual improvement progress and schools being put on these lists for potential closures and all these different issues and funding cuts and trying to lobby at the state for more funding and dealing with the just the cacophony of craziness that was coming out of Austin, right? And there was something promising that I could see. A group of young people, a group of students. It started with a group at Carnegie Vanguard High School, and it was the creation of the HISD Student Congress. They have a radio show. Thankfully, Ted Weisgall put them in touch with KPFT, and they have a radio show on KPFT. And that young voice that was so wise beyond its years, that came forward, and actually those young people filed the first amicus curiae brief in the school finance litigation in Texas history, but also in national history. And they actually made a footnote in the Texas Supreme Court decision. And I think that when the young people, read the opinion, they were shocked. They couldn't believe it. They said, we came forward with the situation that presently exists, and there are such dire circumstances that we have seen that's going on in so many different schools, and yet the Texas Supreme Court did not make a decision to call a special session so that way we could do what is right to make sure that our schools are adequately funded. So those challenges exist, and the community is going to be impacted by what is coming down, coming down the trail, and in fact impacting us in November, because that's when this issue will likely be on the ballot. But being in this position as the director of education, I'm trying to look at what's happening in the 17 different school districts in the city of Houston, what is happening in the level of higher education, what's happening with folks in reentry, what is occurring in terms of trying to connect our young people to opportunities that exist. One of the initiatives that we're working on right now is the Higher Houston Youth Program. And it is something in which the city has had a summer jobs program for 16 to 18-year-olds to work in various city departments. But it was only 458 jobs. So, the Mayor Sylvester Turner said, we're the 4th largest city in the country, soon to be the 3rd largest city in the country. And we only have 458 jobs available for our young people. Let's put out a call and ask corporations to join in. Let's ask them to sponsor, hire, or donate to this program. So that way we can make connections, serve as the city's temp agency. So that way a young person who's trying to figure out their House Bill 5 endorsement, and they're supposed to figure out by the 8th grade, if they can figure out whether they made the right choice or not. Back in the day at the High School for Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice, we had the opportunity to select these different career tracks, and we had the opportunity to also intern our senior year. We would go and work at the police department, we would go and work at a downtown law firm. There were opportunities for us to reach out, be in the community, meet people, and that brings me to a very important point. When I was on the school board, I was trying to understand, and now that I'm serving in this capacity as Director of Education for the City of Houston, I said, what in the world allows a young person to succeed? What it's described as social mobility, right? What is social mobility? And in my opinion, social mobility, another way of describing it is the American dream. How can you in terms of your educational opportunity, be able to do better than your parents and their parents. This growth that should take place when you do all the right things, right? And so they say that it involves 5 factors. 1, what is the pattern of residential segregation in a community? 2, is there access to income equality? 3, what is the family structure? 4, do the young people have access to quality public schools in their community? But a 5th factor that I didn't focus on and I wasn't fully aware of is something called social capital. And so I think about, I was like, what is social capital? Social capital is the ability to network, the ability to have knowledge and empowering information that's going to connect you to opportunity. Our kids may have tons of programs. Our kids may have, information, but if they don't have the social capital, then they're going to miss out on the opportunities that exist. And so in this experience of being in the Higher Houston Youth Program, we had our last job fair at St. John's Church this week. Kids came despite the rain. Youth were there for their job interviews. I saw 5 young people that graduated with engineering degrees, and they're having a hard time finding work. They've done everything they're supposed to do. They've received the scholarships, but for one reason or another, they don't have the social capital to make the networks, to have the internships that they were required to have beforehand, or to have the connections to the job opportunities that exist today. So we're in the 4th largest city. We're Space City. We're Heart City, right? What are we going to do to work collectively as a community to have a mindset shift where we're all on the same page, where we say we are going to allow opportunity to exist through communication, collaboration, and coordination. Many of the programs in the past, we're talking about the 60s, right? The war on poverty, the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, different things that said, how can we make sure that every person's life can be, their passions and dreams and interests can be fulfilled? What are we doing as a city to come together, to share a collective vision? As the mayor says, he does not want to be a mayor of a city of haves and have-nots. He wants to have a city where we're all in this together and we can all figure out how to make a plan and a strategic vision so that way every child, regardless of zip code, will be able to succeed. And recently, a couple of weeks ago, we had the first meeting of, there's, as I said before, there's 17 different school districts in the city of Houston. And it was the first meeting of at least most of the superintendents as well as some of the large charter schools to sit down together with the mayor and say, what can we do to work together and collaborate? And how can we also formulate a plan for the next legislative session so that way we're not all running down different hallways and trying to talk to different persons, but coming together collectively as the city of Houston. And the next step is we're also going to meet with the institutions of higher learning. And we're going to say, what can you do, whether either it could be to open up the ivory tower to young people over the summer to have these great learning opportunities, or what can we do to make sure that I have people coming up to me and say, Juliet, we can't even get the information out for young people to fill out their FAFSA and TAFSA forms on time. We're in the age of technology, and yet we're still in the Stone Age. So we've got to figure out better ways to network and connect. And that's a part of all of us having this a mayor who's progressive that wants for us to collaborate. I know it's become a cliche now. We've been working in silos for years. And where has that taken us? Or where has that gotten us, right? So I think that it's an exciting new day for us to look at. First of all, you got to, it's like going to the doctor. You get your diagnostics, you run your labs, you have to know where you are. There's no reason or you should no longer put lipstick on a pig. You got to make sure that when there's a problem, it's faced head on. And the question is, how can we work together to solve these great problems? Because they're not going to go away. And the city of Houston You know, it's like the thought some people have is like, oh, we'll just bring people in from other parts of the country. No. We have to make sure that the children from our community, in our community, are given the greatest opportunity. So I just want to thank you so much for the time to be able to share some time with you today, and also to say, let's all serve as an advocate for youth. If you have an opportunity to mentor, volunteer, read to a child at a school, I know that there are fantastic opportunities to do so. And I just thank you so much for your time.